The year was May 4th, 1995. Syracuse, New York. The WWF had a new concept. WWF in your house, the premiere. Your commentators on the evening were Doc Hendricks, also known as Michael Hayes, and Vince McMahon. The WWF had the idea of a blended house show with a mini pay-per-view style that would fill the gaps in between, allowing monthly pay-per-views. The main primary feud for this event was Diesel versus Sid for the WWF title. On Raw, after WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels was awarded a rematch with Diesel. However, Shawn sold his services were no longer needed, and he claimed that he didn't need a bodyguard distracting the referee and causing him to injure himself. Sid took exception to this and gave Shawn multiple power bombs during the commercial break. This turns Michaels into a babyface for the first time since 1992, and Shawn would take the time off to heal from the attack, so Diesel would step up and get revenge for Shawn Michaels. It was then revealed that Sid was working for the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and his $1 Million corporation. They used the Michaels just to get to the WWF title. I'm your host, Bryan, the Hype Ballard, back at it again with this retro review of WWF in your house premiere. The show started off with what arguably was the best match of the evening. Bret Hart versus Hakushi. Hakushi lived a short amount of time in the WWF land, but while it was a short stay, it wasn't short on action or talent. They show footage of Hakushi attacking Hart while fans were chanting, "We want Bret." Todd Pettengill's backstage with them, and he acknowledges the chant. Todd also says that Bret is ready to go tonight. And then he says, ultimately Bret sings Hakushi's praises. He mentions the undefeated streak, and he says Hakushi has never faced the excellence of execution. Bret then decides, and he dedicates this match to his mother Helen, since this does take place on Mother's Day, and he threatens Jerry Lawler. He tells Jerry Helen is watching and says that she has one thing in mind: I'm going to tear you apart. So ultimately, we got some other notes on this. We start out the match with Bret Hart and Hakushi. Bret Hart rekindled his feud with Lawler previously. In this matchup, a nice back and forth. Even though the foreshadowing was Jerry Lawler, the match between Bret and Hakushi was booked for this pay-per-view. And Bret decided to prove wrong, and he actually would wrestle twice on this evening's show. Hakushi, again, the Japanese wrestler, Kinsuke Shinsaki, aka Jinsei Shinsaki, also known as in previous federations. He was only 3 years into his career at this point, but it was quite impressive. Hakushi name literally translates to White Angel, the character he was portraying, and his look is ultimately amazing. His face and upper body are covered in painted tattoos. I always joked and said that it was a Chinese menu in a restaurant in China, or a Japanese menu. But he enters the ring dressed like Raiden from Mortal Kombat, and also is managed by Shinja Sato from the Orient Express. If you guys remember them from like WrestleMania 6 through 7 type days. Shinja wears a white suit and paints his face like a Japanese meme. But basically, everything about the Hakushi presentation was really cool, and it's a shame WWF didn't do too much with him. The match, they trade holds, they work each other, they get each other's arms. A lot of technicalness in this matchup. Hakushi shows off his agility, and there's some miscommunication early, but they adjust very quickly. Hakushi then takes control by giving Bret a springboard splash in the form of a Bronco Buster. Ultimately, in the match, on the monitor, we watch Shinja, who distracts the referee. Lawler's watching on the monitor in the back. Shinja distracts the referee, and some cheating ensues. Then Hakushi nails a handspring elbow and a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker. He also lands a flying headbutt, but it's just not enough. So he attempts a springboard version. Bret moves and goes into the fishing routine. However, Shinja distracts and trips him. Bret answers by diving onto Shinja, so Hakushi nails him with an acai moonsault. Next, he attempts suplexing Brett from the apron, but Brett reverses it into a victory roll that he liked to do a lot. For the 1, the 2, and the 3. Bret Hart, 14 minutes, 39 seconds into this one. And after the match, we get an explosion of all kinds of stuff, fireworks going off, and ultimately Bret celebrating his win and breaking the streak of Hakushi. Bret celebrates and exits the ring, but he tweaks his knee in the process, and he limps out while Doc Hendricks gleefully points out his injury, questioning how he'll do against Lawler later in the evening. Bret Hart limping and definitely knowing how to sell that limp, as he did in Royal Rumble 92 with Owen Hart. Next up in the night, we have a handicap match. A handicap match being Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie versus Razor Ramon. This was originally supposed to be Razor and a 1-2-3 Kid, but due to injury, it ended up being a handicap match. The Kid injured his neck previously to the match. It was changed to the handicap despite Jarrett also feuding with both Aldo Montoya and Bob Holly. Ultimately, I'm not sure why one of them wasn't added into this matchup, but for most part, we do get the Razor one into the match. The Roadie distracts Razor and Jarrett attacks, but Razor gets an early advantage and he has Jarrett on the ropes until the Roadie attacks from behind. He enters the match. He lands on a clothesline, some elbows before gyrating. Razor rallies and gets some near falls, and Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie double team him. Razor fights again, attempting the Razor's edge, but Jarrett backdrops him onto the ropes, and the Roadie capitalizes with a flying clothesline to the floor. So Hendricks bothers a little bit with McMahon to admit it was a good move. Jarrett stops Ramon, comes back with both men collide. The Roadie tries to slow things down in the match with a headlock, but Razor recovers, and he gives the Roadie a super back suplex. Unfortunately, Jarrett clips Razor's knee and attempts a figure 4 leg lock. Razor stops it and shoves Jarrett into the Roadie. This allows him to nail the Razor's edge for the 1, the 2, and the 3. Razor Ramon, 12 minutes, 36 second mark. Razor reaches his feet, and the Roadie attempts to attack him. Razor sidesteps and tries to give the Roadie a Razor's edge, but Jarrett clips his knee. And then again, he puts the Ramon in the figure 4 leg lock. Aldo Montoya, who was feuding with Jarrett, arrives to help, and he takes out the Roadie, but Jarrett jumps in, and they return to attack until a mystery man jumps, a Puerto Rican man, enters the ring and saves Razor. Vince and Doc Hendricks have no idea who he is and says how fans should not be involved. Vince says he has no business in the ring, and the officials agree. Well, we find out in the post-match that this man ends up walking backstage with Razor Ramon and said he didn't really quite recognize him right away. But this would be none other than infamously known as the debut of Savio Vega, previously Quang under the mask of WWF days. But Savio Vega here to save his friend Razor Ramon from the 2-on-1 handicap mayhem. Next we have a King of the Ring qualifying matchup, a very short one. We have Mabel versus Adam Bomb. The Bomb Squad is in the house. Adam Bomb had a great presentation. Good size, good wrestling, in-ring action. He had the Bomb Squad. He had like a fan. He had a mushroom cloud that went off as a smoke. That was like his pyro for when he entered the ring. I always liked Adam Bomb, enjoyed his work. Mo, Men on a Mission, previously going to a single mode here. Mo distracts Adam. And so Mabel attacks. And then ultimately he squashes Bomb in the corner. He attempts another one, but Adam Bomb moves. And then he sends Mabel to the floor in a shoulder tackle and nails a slingshot crossbody. He also sends Mabel into the ring and does a slingshot clothesline. Bomb then follows that with a flying clothesline, but it's just not enough. Sadly, Adam falls into a rolling kick, and Mabel hits a power slam for the 1, the 2, and the 3. And we get a minute 54 of action in which Mabel moves on in King of the Ring. And he'll go on to win King of the Ring in 1995. And you almost wonder what would have happened if we would have erased that and we would not have gotten the Summer of King Mabel. Could we have had a Summer of Adam Bomb is king. What would that look like? A cool looking crown, a little bit of a interesting perspective of maybe a WWF fantasy. What if Adam Bomb beat Mabel? Who wins King of the Ring that year? And could it have been Adam Bomb or somebody else that would have taken us to SummerSlam against Diesel in the main event? Up next, we have Yokozuna and Owen Hart versus the Smoking Guns in a tag title match. Jim Cornette and Mr. Fuji are on hand to help the champs. Even though the Guns had their issues with Men on a Mission, they still had a rematch for the titles. That build was simple enough. They wanted their titles back. Both teams interfered in each other's matches. Ultimately, we do get the match. The Guns attempting to knock Yoko to the start, but they just can't. However, Bart slams Owen. The Guns double team him until Owen nails an enziguri. Then Yoko uses a nerve hold of sorts on Billy. Ultimately, Owen gives him a neck breaker. Billy tries to rally with a sunset flip, but it's just not enough. He's sent to the floor where Yoko tries attacking, but Yoko hits the post. This opens up the door for Bart, who slams Owen and lands a back suplex. The Guns follow up with a double team neck breaker. Unfortunately, Bart flies out of the ring on his missed crossbody, and Yoko gives him a leg drop. Billy fends off Owen, but Yoko rolls the unconscious Bart into the ring for the 1, the 2, and the 3, the pinfall. 5 minutes, 44 seconds. The champions retain. We get a backstage segment next. We got Todd Pettengill with the WWF champion Diesel. He brings it down a little bit and says that it's Mother's Day and his mom just died. So he's dedicating some stuff towards her. Todd then brings it up again. Henry Godwin attacking him over the weekend. Diesel says the WWF is filling with 300-pound men that are gunning for him. He also says that Ted DiBiase is paying people to take him out, but it didn't work. Then Todd brings up Shawn Michaels and asks if he feels Diesel, how he feels about it. He says Sid needs to be stopped, and that attack lit a fire under him. Sid might go to the master. Sid might be the master and the rule of the world, but he says that he's a walrus. Well, it was a very random, but finally, Diesel says he can't wait and yells Sid hasn't seen nothing, so he has seen something. Afterwards, we get a promo with Jerry Lawler in the ring with his mother on Mother's Day. How nice of him to bring his mom to the WWF land to witness his son beating Bret Hart. A very, very young lady, I'm sure, is a lot younger than Lawler himself, but miraculously is his mother. She says it'll make her proud if Jerry beats Bret tonight. Lawler asks what she'll do afterwards. She says she wants to challenge Helen Hart to a match, Bret's mother. Jerry tells her to simply look for the pile of wrinkled flesh in one of the seats. Then Lawler gets a kiss on the cheek from his mom and helps her out of the ring. And then, ultimately, this speaks volumes about Lawler. Meanwhile, Todd is backstage with Bret, and he interviews Bret Hart. And Vince says that they're in the gorilla position. It says that it's the first time they used the term on the air, actually. The gorilla position is the first time they've ever acknowledged that position on a live pay-per-view or on the air. If you don't know, it's named after Gorilla Monsoon because he would help produce the shows from that area. It's the space directly behind the curtains. So Todd asks Bret about his knee, and he says that it's 100% and dances a little bit. And then he says, it's not April Fool's Day, but it'll just have to do. He tells Lawler his history and why he would reveal the truth before the match. It doesn't defeat the purpose. Bret Hart playing a little possum on this WWF In Your House. Guys, we got the fans of ProWrestling.com. Me and the rest of the team over there at the Wrestling Fans Insight. Got a lot of great podcasts over there, Ted's Takes, among others. Check us out. You can follow me at the Bryan Adkins. We get into the Bret Hart Jerry Lawler match, and what a matchup they had in matches during the 90s. I remember the infamous Kiss My Foot match. But ultimately, this one, Bret immediately attacks Lawler, and Jerry keeps regrouping. The fight spills onto the floor, and Bret rams him into the apron. Lawler tries to beg and tries begging and backing off, and Brett is having none of that. He backdrops Jerry and chokes him. Brett then ducks another. Lawler surprises him with a pile driver, but Brett no-sells it. He answers with a bulldog and his own pile driver. He then has a bit more fun with Lawler as Doc Hendricks claims Brett made a pass at Jerry's mom. Knowing Brett, he may have. Who knows? Shinja then appears. Earl Ebner warns him to leave, but Earl gets tangled in the ropes, and this opens the door for Hakushi to attack Bret Hart. Lawler holds him while Hakushi lands an axe handle and a couple flying headbutts. Ebner is free at this time. Jerry making a jackknife pin for the win. Jerry Lawler, shockingly enough, look at the look on that face. Jerry Lawler, 5 minutes, 1 second. He beats Bret Hart in this one. After the bell, Hakushi tries to attack Bret. While Lawler holds him, Bret moves and Hakushi nails Jerry by mistake, and Bret cleans house. While Lawler retreats with his mother, and Hendricks laughs about Bret's loss and says Bret is overly embarrassed. That match would end up going on to a little more of a feud with Jerry Lawler and Bret Hart. But we would go on. As time running out for Diesel, we get some backstage segment with an extreme close-up on Sid. And he says Sid will be crowned champion. Sid says Diesel has become another symbol of many victories. He calls him a victim. No one will help Diesel, and now he has to meet the master and the ruler of the world. Sid then repeats, he's the ruler of the world in an angry voice. He didn't shout a single word, but whispered it and made his point in this one. But it's still a great intense promo from the masterful one. Doc Hendricks nearly ruins it by trying to be cool and callous, and he calls it the calm before the storm. Then we get Todd and Stephanie are standing at the big box of entries of the main aisleway of In Your House. It would be an odd situation for the PLE or pay-per-view where the WWF would actually give away a house in your house. He suggests that they used a rake to sort through the envelopes. They're sorting through all these envelopes, and then he lifts Steph into the box. She stomps all over the entries, hands one to it. A couple officials open the envelope, and Todd calls the winner. At first, he botches it, but then he finally reaches the winner, Matt Papacelli. You can hear him and his family getting excited as they won, and the dad thinks it's a joke despite really seeing them on TV. It would actually be, the house would be won by, I believe, a 13-year-old kid for getting his own house in Florida, a kid from the West Coast. So ultimately, they gave away a house right on a golf course. Doc Hendricks makes the joke of trying. Tardy says he knows the kid and he's actually his golfing buddy. Then we get to the main event. We got Diesel the champion versus Psycho Sid with Ted DiBiase and the $1 Million Corporation. Sid makes his entrance and Vince asks people to imagine Sid entering their house. WCW used to say that Sid hailed from wherever he damn well pleased. He might just do that, but Diesel then enters the arena and Sid stares him down. And Sid stares down Vince. He dares Vince McMahon to call him a psycho to his face, but Vince ignores him. Doc tries to stir the pot and claims that he saved Vince from a beating. And then Sid and Diesel go face to face. Sid mocks the weird blinking that Diesel does. Or actually, reverse that. He mocks the blinking of Sid. That's Diesel. Diesel whips Sid from the corner to corner, and he nails some clotheslines and elbows. A lot of big man matchup here, back and forth with some standard big man-like moves. We get some boots. We get some elbows. He lands some short arm clotheslines, and he hits and floors Sid with a jumping one. And then the fight spills into the ring, or out of the ring, and back in again, until DiBiase distracts Diesel. Sid attacks and he rams him right in the ribs, working those ribs pretty heavily, which would highlight a setup for future matches throughout the summer of '95. Sadly then, Sid slows down the match, clubbing forearms, and a long camel clutch moment from Sid on Diesel. He holds him in the camel clutch for a while, and then he stands up and sits back down on him multiple times just to work that back. Sid's slow to cover, doesn't get quite enough. Sid tries to continue the attack until he misses a corner. Diesel answers with a snake eyes and a big boot. And he hits the jackknife power bomb and a big boot. But Tatanka would come in and cause the disqualification just when he was about to defend his title. So by DQ, Diesel would win this matchup at the 11-minute 31-second mark. And after the match, we got Sid, Tatanka, DiBiase all attacking Diesel. Sid tries to powerbomb him again, but Diesel backdrops him. Bam Bam Bigelow making his appearance. And he arrives and makes the save. He cleans house, and the corporation, the $1 Million Corporation, retreats. Howard Finkel announces the decision while Diesel and Bam Bam celebrate in the ring. This will set up the following pay-per-view, the King of the Ring, where Diesel and Bam Bam Bigelow would team up against the corporation in order to get their revenge. Doc says this isn't over, and that's exactly what happens. Then Vince says Shawn Michaels has to be pleased watching this. And he plugs the King of the Ring before we say goodnight. We do get a weird WWF commercial to end the show with aliens about to destroy the Earth. I can't make this up, guys. And it says about how they should give the human beings more time because of the WWF superstars are such interesting specimens. Then the WWF claims that they might just be saving the world. I wonder if the master and the ruler of that world is Sid. Where the aliens, maybe this was meant to be a commercial or projection in Sid's head. Or maybe the WWF just did weird things in 1995. Could be that. Guys, I want to say, if you're a fan of the old school WWF, hit that like button. But what was your favorite in your house moment and weird moment? Leave that in the comments below. I'd like to relive some of those memories with you guys. Let's get into the final thoughts. There was a pre-show to this that was hilarious where Sid actually does his infamous, he's cutting a promo and they're live, and he asks for a redo. Not realizing the pay-per-view was live, Jim Ross advises that they're live, pal, and Sid wanted the redo, and then he goes on and does it like a champ. The look on Sid's face was priceless. We also got a pre-show dark match with Jean-Pierre Lafitte defeating Bob Holly. And we got a post-dark match with The Undertaker defeating Kama with Ted DiBiase. Bam Bam Bigelow defeating Tatanka with DiBiase. Owen Hart versus British Bulldog that ended in a draw for a King of the Ring qualifier. And the WWF, as we mentioned, gave away an actual house in Orlando, Florida. The house was sold 6 months after it was won by the 11-year-old kid, Matt Pompaselli, for $175,000 that he used to pay for college. And what happened with that WWF In Your House now? Maybe the WWF could find that and use that as a scene or a skit for future PLEs. Ultimately, we did get the main event of Sid and Diesel, which started a feud that would continue through most of the spring of '95. Standard big man match back and forth, nothing terrible. But I actually did like the Bret Hart story through the night, having multiple matches, losing to Lawler, keeping that feud going. But I enjoyed the match with Hakushi, as I mentioned in the comments before. That's everything I got. Leave your thoughts down below. I'm going to head out. Thank you, guys. I'm going to get out of here for now, but hang around because it's never goodbye. It's game over.